Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world that you are, and welcome to today's episode of the Tuesday Telecast. This is season 5, episode 3, and I am thrilled to see you here today. Today, I have a special guest. His name is Mark Pfister, and he has been all over the world showing up in a technical way and in a really helpful way for companies. And he has a pursuit of his joy and his meaning and his purpose. And we're going to hear about that right now. What is the pursuit of meaning? How do we do it? And how did it work for Mark? So let's go and bring Mark into the house. Good morning, Mark. Welcome to the Joyful Path.
Good morning.
Thanks for being on the show. Today is a day about, about half a year after I met you. And you, at the time, were going through transitions, and all of a sudden you knew what you were going to do, and you said, yeah, I'm going to do it. So tell me, what is it like to just have that pop into your head and to decide to do something about it? Because sometimes, some people will hem and haw, and some of us will jump and then say, what was that experience for you?
It was a little bit tumultuous because my partner kind of didn't want me to show up how I really needed to show up in the world. So that tumultuous bit aside, it was the most freeing, expansive thing. It's kind of almost like when you notice that you're kind of a little bit slouched, you're sitting in your chair just a little low, and then you suddenly have this thought or this idea, and suddenly your whole body changes. It's like, and your shoulders move back a little, and your breathing is so much different, and you're poised and ready. It's not just a bodily difference in just how you show up. It's mind, spirit, it's your whole consciousness is at a whole new level, because you've arrived at a place that a lot of the world likes to call ikigai. And for the audience that doesn't know what that means, it's sort of this intersection, or at least the American interpretation of the Japanese ikigai is the interpretation that which you love, that which you're good at, that which the world needs, and that which you can make money doing. So if you can arrive at the intersection of all four of those, then you have sort of your life purpose. You have a purpose to pursue. And with that said, I had arrived at that knowledge of what I needed to go pursue and began doing so.
Of those four things, as not everybody arrives at them all at once, what is more important to you? What's the most important thing to you?
Well, early in my career, it was because I was taking care of two daughters, 365 days a year, as a single solo parent. It was certainly, doing something that puts food on the table intersected with something the world needed. And at the time I was working for eBay. I felt like the world really needed that, because at any given time, you know, a family might arrive at a place where they're struggling financially, and they turn to their garage and they're like, well, we could sell that on eBay. We could sell that and that. And they turn to their home and they're like, well, we've got all these other things, and just turn their stuff into cash. And so with that said, I felt like, that's something the world needs.
Right.
But I was also being told that I'm kind of good at it. So eventually I arrived at a place, my career was early and then it was sort of mid. I arrived at a place where my management said, hey, we're going to promote you because you're really good at this. And I said, okay, sure, let's do that. And so, but of course I was having fun. So actually I was in Ikigai, as it turns out. It was one of those things where all the pieces kind of ended up later fitting and I was there. So that's, in terms of fulfillment. I mean, joy is doing that which you love, right? That's just the top part of Ikigai, but there are these other 3 parts, and that's, to me, true fulfillment. Joy and fulfillment, they kind of hopefully go hand in hand, but simply not always.
There's a place in that where we are pursuing what we love, or we're doing something that makes us joyful, and it becomes less joyful because of the other things, because perhaps we are struggling to keep a roof over our heads, or communication around that is not good because nobody else wants us to be doing that thing and it's affecting them. So what is your what else did you do during that time that was what you loved? Did you do anything that you loved that didn't work out for people around you, or that didn't bring you some sort of satisfaction in the end?
I would say yes, there were some things that I did, well, over the course of my whole life, that turned out to not bring satisfaction to those around me. In 2019, I was writing a book, and excuse me, one moment. I'm going to clear my throat. So I was writing, I really wanted to write this book. And for me, writing the book was a big research project. From outside of the room, there wasn't any typing. There was a lot of reading and a lot of researching, and my screen was always full of words. I was reading stuff, I wasn't writing. And so my wife comes in and says, you're not writing. I thought you were writing a book. What's going on here? She, really would like to see me succeed. And I let her know that writing is 99% thinking, 1% typing. Okay, maybe that's not the right mixture for you as a writer, or that person or that other audience member as a writer, but
for Mark Pfister.
for me, and the book that I was writing in 2019, that's what it was. And so it provided some consternation, let's say, some frustration that a book wasn't being banged out on the keyboard.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's the only example that I can think of, because for the most part, I've been pursuing this connection between mind, body, soul in such a way that it aligns nicely with Ikigai most of my career. Um, one other example of a time where I found myself in a place that had moved away from Ikigai was when I co-founded a company. It was a fintech marketplace. Uh, Essentially, the idea was, let's say that you're a small to medium business and you're running out of cash. Um, you need to make payroll by Friday, let's say, or you need to cut a check to pay a vendor, whatever it is. There's what can you do? You can go get a personal loan, which takes roughly 30 days. A personally guaranteed business loan or a personal loan, and those take a lot of time. We wanted to build a marketplace where you could just sell a receivable. So you have, I don't know what kind of frog just jumped in my throat this morning.
It's a special Tuesday telecast frog just for you.
So you want to make payroll by Friday, and you have these receivables, and you're looking at them. Can I sell these? Or maybe you heard somewhere that there's this new company that showed up, and I can just connect my accounting system, can integrate that with their capability, and it'll suck the data out of my accounting system, take a look at it and say, hey, here's a whole bunch of cash sitting here. You have a receivable from that company for $10,000. You have a receivable from that company, but they're not due yet. So the companies aren't paying me yet. So that's kind of my struggle. And so what if I could just sell? And I'll take a haircut on the $10,000 invoice that I have a receivable for. Maybe it'll be paid in 15 days. Maybe they'll pay late. I don't really know. But I'm just going to sell this one, and I'm going to sell it for $9,400. I'm taking a $600 haircut to make payroll, and that's exactly what I need, $9,400. So that was the big idea, and we thought it was brilliant, and we got it moving, and we got it going. We got revenue, but the challenge for me in that role was I didn't like or respect my manager. Our CEO would fire 50% of the people who walked in the front door in the first couple of weeks. Literally, I went back and counted them and said, I wonder what percentage he's just fired. And turns out it was right at exactly 50%. And there were about 16 people at the company. So that's 16 people that had already been fired. And I'm like, wait, what's going on here? You invite someone on the bus and you're like, here's your seat. You would think that if they're not working out in that seat, you'd maybe find a different seat for them. Or maybe you'd work together. Maybe there's a shade of gray that says, it's not black, it's not white. It's let's work on this.
So for you, it's about the people.
It is. It absolutely is. I've worked many contracts in my life. So unlike most people who have had maybe 6 jobs, in 30 something years, maybe one in 5 years, you're switching jobs, 6 or 7 jobs, maybe. I've had 30 or 40 because I've been a consultant about half of my career. So I'll have a 6-month stint and a 6-month stint. And so back then, I would work for anybody who'd pay me. But now I've arrived at a place where not only can I find people who are, my people, intersect with my values, intersect with, well, let's talk Ikigai. that which I love, that which I'm good at, that which the world needs, and that which I can be paid for. So there I am, and now here I am showing up in the world where I've chosen to find my people, chosen to find the right companies to work for, and that is what I would recommend to everyone: is pull together your people, your community, your the people that align with your values, and build something or join something.
One thing about being in joy is to do something that you love, or it's not counter to your being all the time. The Japanese version, and this is where Ikigai came from, has little to do with money, and there are things that you've done in your life too that seem like they are more purpose driven, and others that seem like they are more your non-monetary uh, ikigai. Like, you have a great love of the mountains, and your favorite thing to do is, or a couple of your favorite things to do from what I've heard from you, is to run in the mountains, to hike in the mountains, to have that kind of freedom, and also to snowboard. And that wasn't something that you started out in loving, right? But that's so. And at this point, those things are seem like they're in more of a ikigai kind of being for you, where you don't, it's not about how you show up, it's about how you feel, and everything is in alignment when you do those things, and you are home in yourself. Would you agree with that statement, or how would you describe that?
Yeah, I heard something pretty powerful, and I'll back into the question that you just had. Is there's these other things that don't make you money, but yet are they part of what I was talking about or not? So I had a great, very spiritual experience just a few days ago, listening to a speaker who said there are only two states of a human being: suffering and non-suffering. You can alternate between those states. For example, let's say you are meditating and you're over here, you're not suffering. And then you get back to everyday life and something happens and, grumble, or I'm angry, or and now you're suffering. And then he said, suffering can be in the spirit, it can be in the mind, it can be in the heart, it can be in the body. And if any of those is suffering in that moment, you're in a state of suffering. And last, if you don't know whether you're in a state of suffering, you're in a state of suffering. So when he said that, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. No, not like a ton of bricks, like a ton of light. What is a ton of light weigh like? Anyway. So
It weighs a ton.
so I realize that my body often is suffering, and when it has been non-suffering, it's been, yes, in a time of meditation sometimes, but also when I've been snowboarding, like at this place, Snowbird, Utah. It's the most joyful place on earth. No, it's not Disneyland, although my daughter would disagree with me. It's Snowbird, Utah. Why? Well, first, I know that mountain. I know almost every inch of that mountain very, very well. But it just has so many playful gullies and steeps that are just, when you're into snowboarding and skiing, uh, those are places where you can find flow. That is, the mountain flows beneath you, and all you're doing is moving with flow. That is all. You're not skiing and snowboarding any longer. You're in a place of zen. You're in a place of flow state. It's playful. It's woohoo. It's sort of doing what you love, uh, and it's not much else. The world doesn't need it necessarily. um, are you good at it? Well, maybe you've arrived at a place where you're good at it. So maybe it's those two, the intersection of those two. But what it was really doing for me is creating a state of non-suffering in the body. And in that moment, it was non-suffering in spirit, soul, mind as well. Because the spirit, mind, and soul simply fade away to a point when you're in this body flow state. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to touch on that you have it, the, what you're describing is presence, and whether you're good at it or not, there's where the ikigai comes in. You might become good at it, or you might not, but you're not hurting anybody, and you're having a great time doing it, and you're actually present. And there brings in the suffering versus not suffering. When we're in a not suffering state, we're present in our hearts and our bodies, but we may be floating in our in what we're doing, because our body loves so much what we're doing, and our heart loves so much what we're doing. And it doesn't matter whether, so there we might fall, and it's okay. We might, kind of like when babies are learning how to walk, they get up and they fall down, and if they let out one cry for 1 second, they're back up again, because they're enjoying the pursuit of walking, and all they want to do is walk, and it's just so exciting and so much fun. If we teach them that, oh, poor thing, you've fallen, live in all that pain, because that's what we're about for some humans. But you don't have to do that. And in your state of being in the snow and gliding over the snow and being in flow, we can be in that kind of flow for in anything in our lives. It depends on us. It could be anything, and it's not the same for each of us.
yeah.
I want to touch on something else, that um, you moved to Utah as a single parent. Is that right? And um, was that a necessity, or was that in order um, to bring some sort of meaning, or some sort of flow, or some sort of joy to your family, to you? What was that big picking up your kids and moving to Utah about?
It was, in fact, my pursuit of meaning. So I was raising my daughters in the Bay Area. And if any of you are in the Bay Area, you'll know that it's a wonderful mixing pot of cultures. And I really valued exposing my daughters to the various cultures there. It was
Mm.
really just fantastic.
Yeah.
However, there is one other thing in the drinking water there, and that's success. Um, it really is. There's a book called The Millionaire Next Door. There are a lot of millionaires next door. And so it's a place of these different cultures, but also this pursuit of success, this pursuit of more. And so it's kind of a little bit of a materialistic paradise. You know, you arrive at a stop sign, four-way stop, and let's say there are three other cars. On this corner, there's a BMW. On this corner, there's a Lexus. On this corner, there's a Toyota Camry. And you're driving whatever you drive, let's say. So yes, there are those who, you know, drive everyday cars, but the money there is just everywhere. So with
Mm.
that said, it was a place where, you know, my daughters would show up at school, and if you didn't have the latest Gucci handbag, you're not one of us. And I thought to myself, wow, I'm seeing the same thing at work
Mm.
as I am in the school. And is that the kind of influence that I wanted on my daughters? So I said, well, where else would there be
It
sort
sounds
of
like this pursuit of more in a monetary way, huh? And not in, but it in that made everybody show up the same, and if you didn't, you were other.
yeah, yeah, indeed. Well, it was for the kids, it was about the things.
Yeah.
You know, what are you wearing on your feet? What are you wearing? What is that? What are you wearing? Oh, your Gucci hand. Oh, I love your handbag. Um, and so, yeah, there was a lot of ostracism based on how you showed up, what
Mm.
you were wearing. But at the corporate level in corporations, instead of asking about you or about your family, one of the first questions that would be asked is, where do you live?
Mm.
The idea being, oh, you live in Los Altos. Oh, you're one of us. Oh, you live in Los Gatos. Okay, yeah, you're one of us. Anyway, the point here is, I wanted a less materialistic place to live, and a place where family values, you know, love, non-judgmentalism, uh, joy, family, you know, these things are what's important. So I realized that probably small town, that's going on, that's in the drinking water there, but also Salt Lake, where I decided to move. Plenty of opportunity, so of course I needed that in the realm of IT and tech. Uh,
Yeah.
I realized there'd be plenty of opportunity, but also be close to the mountains. I was kind of looking for that too. And so rather than uh, elsewhere, I considered, um, decided that the right environment in which to thrive joyfully, to borrow your little phrase there, was to move to Utah. And a year afterwards, my daughters both told me at the kitchen table, Dad, thanks for moving us here. The quality of our friends, this is exactly how my eldest daughter phrased it. The quality of my friends is so much better here. And I'm like, I didn't plant those words in her mouth, but if I could have planted perfect words, that's exactly what I would have had my daughter say one
Wow.
day that I was hoping for. And it came true. So, you know, fast forward a lot. Um, you know, today they are thriving joyfully. They're 29 and 28. One is graduated with a marketing degree and is in a wonderful job, uh, making good money, pursuing a good life, also in the great outdoors like her father. And then my other daughter is thriving joyfully, often going to Disneyland. That's her place of joy. And and pursuing a doctorate
Pretty
nurse.
joyful place.
I'm sorry.
I said it's a pretty joyful place.
Indeed, for many. And pursuing a doctorate nurse practitioner, she's at the top of her class, and she's she just purchased a home. A lot of work, but a lot of joy as well. So it was the right move. Clearly, we're all, sort of pursuing that ikigai, but also not necessarily for everyone to say, research across the whole country. Where would I like to live the rest of my life? And then really, create sort of a spreadsheet and like, here are all the columns. Here's what's good about every place. Here's what I love about every place. And
It's an option that you have in the United States, or in the European Union, where you can actually move from one place to someplace that's very different. Not everybody in the world has that option where it is so different, but I would say that people probably do think about whether they come to a decision or not. But I think about where they would like to live, whether they research it quite as much as you. But in your research, you found something that really worked, and that's and that kind of focus really brings you to that place that you love. And so now that we've kind of gotten that there's moving with intention, and going to a place for your recreation with intention, and then changing work with intention. Does the pursuit of meaning, do you think intention has a big part in it?
It does. You see, attention aligning with attention is the key. If you have attention that's moving everywhere, and intention is maybe this line in the center of the screen, let's say, but your attention is doing this, and only once in a while intersecting with intention. You're not really living your life purposefully. Audience, do you know your purpose? Why are you here? I finally arrived at why I'm here on this planet in 2019. And it became even more clear in 2020. And no, it didn't have anything to do with the pandemic at all.
Well, in 2019, that was the year that you had the book experiment, right?
True.
Okay.
But that was not related to my my intention, my pursuit of meaning, lifelong meaning. So in 2019, my marriage counselor diagnosed me as being autistic. And I didn't quite get it. I said, Doc, give me 3 books to read. And I just don't get it. 3 books. And of course, if that's not an autistic response,
Right?
3, not 1. Don't give me a pamphlet. Don't give me a quick video. Give me 3 books.
I need precisely this to go toward this meaning right here.
Give me 4, but at least 3. So it was while reading the second book where my jaw dropped, and I finally got it. And then a week later, my jaw dropped again. And you see, the first jaw drop was like, okay, aligning with with being autistic? What did that mean? And I looked at my childhood, and only autistic kids will spend all day working 100 500 piece puzzles as a 2-year-old. Typical kids don't do that all day long. 4 years old, looking through every page in the encyclopedia, looking for maps. What kid does that? Okay, autistic kids.
And how did that bring you? How did that discovery bring you meaning, or bring you joy, or bring you later?
Well, see, Daniel Pink wrote a book called Drive. What drives people? Turns out beyond a certain salary, market rate salary, and certain rate kind of belonging, the typical togetherness, we're building something, we're doing something, I'm working, what have you. Well, as a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old, you're not so much about market rate salary or finding the team that you want to work with or anything like that. So instead, it's the things that Daniel Pink found in his book, and they are purpose, mastery, and autonomy. For me, early in my life as a 2-year-old, working the jigsaw puzzles was mastery. I was all about mastery, even growing up. It was, calculus. What is that? Ooh, calculus 2, calculus 3, differential equations. That pumped me because mastery. Then later in my career, yes, I wanted to learn and master all of the things, but I moved away from that a little bit into autonomy, where helping teams drive positive change was my key shtick. It was less about learning the latest cool programming language or framework or what have you, systems thing, but rather autonomy. And now it's purpose. And let me tell you a little bit about that. So I've been fascinated since diving into the world of neurodiversity 5 years ago for the first time, and 4 and 3 and 2 years ago, started to understand what some of the challenges are on our planet. There's a crime against humanity, and it's phrased as the statistic in the United States as 80%, and in the UK, 85% of autistic people are unemployed or underemployed. Now, you might wonder, is the problem here the autistic person, or is the problem here society, the way society assesses talent?
The interface between people and people.
It's yes. The answer is yes. It's the interface between people and people. So on the one hand, an autistic person may not show up in such a way as to pass the interview. But on the other hand, there may be unconscious human biases that prevent that person from acquiring said role. What are they? Well, I've done a lot of research. There are 20 different unconscious human biases that are operational that will prevent autistic people from getting that role. So is the problem 100% unconscious human bias? No, but it's a very large part of the problem. And you see, if those unconscious human biases would fall away, then maybe confidence on the part of the autistic person, maybe needing to show up as likable or as more neurotypical, needing to show up in a way that the person is masking who they really are, maybe that would be less important. And so confidence and their true strengths would be able to shine through. So what if there was a better way? I started thinking about this and I couldn't get the thought out of my head. It became my new life purpose. To arrive at a mental framework where I could understand how to move this needle of the 80% or 85%, let's call it 82.5% of autistic people are unemployed or underemployed, how to change that. Well, first, on the employer side, there needs to be a framework. There needs to be a reason why we would want to hire in such a way as to eliminate the human biases and objectively assess talent. Or, as objectively as humanly possible. How do you do that? Well, I started thinking about ideas. How do you do that? Like over here in a space where I've hired a ton of people in my life. I've worked with a ton of people in my life. And how do you assess skills, knowledge, abilities, mindsets? Are their mindsets sort of intersecting with ours? Core values intersecting? Mindsets. What about personal characteristics? We're hiring you to work in a bullpen, but you say you can't work in a bullpen. Okay, that's a personal characteristic. Can we still hire you or not? So the point here is, I started thinking about the full framework, what that would look like. There needs to be, but there's something else missing. How do you map from a job, working in a bullpen? We need a software engineer who speaks this programming language, this skill, knowledge, this ability, intersects with our mindsets, our core values. How do you assess that? But yet you're not involving the unconscious human biases where the person can go, I'm sideways. One person says thumbs up, and then one says their thumbs down on this candidate. And it's really just those unconscious human biases that are probably pointing the thumbs.
Which get in the way of figuring out, of prioritizing what is it of the list of things that we need that's most important. And is one thing, what we really need, is that glowing, or is that really not a good thing? But when we pair all the rest of the stuff, it seems, how much of this do you think is in the school systems, in the way that society brings us up to be together in a way that fits a certain rubric?
So rubrics are a fun topic because some of them are really meaningful and good, and some of them are not. No Child Left Behind has been, you look back in history, every teacher teaching today would say it's been terrible. That rubric is terrible. That framework that we would love everyone to be at the same place. So we're going to teach at this sort of lowest common denominator. It doesn't work for everybody. Ask any teacher today, any teacher, I challenge you, you know a teacher, I know you do, audience, go ask them, is the American school system working today? And the answer will be no. What would be better? Well, every child has their own ikigai. Let them pursue it. Enough said on education, as I'm certainly not an expert over there. But fast forward, in a child's life, are they pursuing ikigai? Well, I certainly am now, because I'm pursuing this idea of non-judgmental inclusion. You see, there's inclusion that a lot of corporations are defining. But are they really being inclusive? I want to create an environment where a lot of jobs can be hired in a blind matching kind of way, eliminating human biases. So my dream is corporations, nonprofits, governments, everyone being able to include in a non-judgmental way, in a way that opens hearts, minds, in a way that can make people go from the kind of leadership, the kind of management that is provisional, that kind of works a little bit, to jump to a new place. And jump is an acronym I invented that is about raising consciousness and human spirit. Jump is making the jump to lower judgmentalism. That's the J. An increase in understanding, an increase in mindfulness, and an increase in patience.
You know, when I hear this, um, you're talking about things that we have brought on in our school systems, in our governments, in our societies. And I'm not going to get into right now where these things have come from, but the ikigai having to do with the non-judgmentalism, the joy having to do with the non-judgmentalism. Do you think that when you have pursued just this pursuit you're talking about, which has a purpose and a joy and a meaning, and is just like, it goes beyond judgment. Purpose goes beyond judgment. When there's, I'm going to go back to babies, because they're our first, unfettered self that arrives on the earth, and we're all about, we've got that eventually, and maybe at first, that autonomy. We're like, we have to figure out how to communicate with what we got, which is very little compared to other humans, and we want to do what they're doing, and we pursue it, and all of the things that we want are right there in the pursuit of how to start walking. I mean, barring something that causes the body not to function like other humans that the baby sees. Most babies are in this kind of state, and their purpose is pretty simple and pretty clear and pretty pervasive. It is like, it is all encompassing. So when that's happening, they're not judging themselves. They're not judging others. They're just saying, I want that. And I want to do that. I want to be that. And later, all of a sudden, we're fighting judgment. Fighting judgment. And, fault me if I've got this wrong, but it seems like the judgment is so much the part of what you came to see that you are mitigating.
Indeed. Am I judging the system that is, in part discriminating against not just autistic people, but also people with face tattoos, people who show up very differently?
Right. Whatever doesn't fit into the thing that goes with not just what it is we need you to work on, and but has to do with, oh, well, you have to work in this kind of environment in which we dress in this way, and we act in this way, and is that what the purpose of the company was? Might be, but if it's not.
Indeed. So am I judging by, hoping the world will arrive at a place of non-judgmental inclusion? Perhaps I am. Perhaps I'm judging it as being non-inclusive because of this 80% statistic. What percentage of that statistic is because of our processes that are in part preventing the autistic person from that joyful thriving? It's an unknown mixture between what a corporation is doing or a nonprofit, whoever it is that's assessing talent, and the person themselves simply not showing up in such a way that, you know, they're the right person for the job. But let's say that it's both issues, both challenges. There are already many, many, many ways for an autistic person to access what it is that will help them show up better. There are resume services that can help improve that. There are interview coaching. There's, I mean, the list goes on. It's out there. There's a coach, there's a person, there are services that can help improve that dramatically. There are even AI capabilities that will take your resume and rewrite it, and it's like, holy catfish, that is so much better. Instantly. So cool. Anyway, improving that side, you know, how a person shows up in their full professionalism. There's a lot of resources, but what the world really needs is a new framework, a new way of blind matching for jobs that don't require likability, which is one of the key things that are assessed in an interview. Is likability really, truly a hard requirement for this role? If the answer is no, okay, quick flow chart, yes or no. The answer is no, then you've arrived at a place where you can blind match. And as long as the core value, you know, as long as I call my framework SCAMP. It's kind of a weird word, but SKAMP, skills, knowledge, abilities, SKA, the typical SKA, and then MP, mindsets, because you've got to incorporate some core values. Most corporations actually do, to some degree, assess for that when they're looking at talent. And then personal characteristics, like I said, in some environments, the environment may not match with the personal characteristics of the individual. So with that said, those are the 5 that I'm looking at. And then, you know, when you look at who I'm hiring, is this a match? If the S, the K, the A, the M, and the P are creating a score that's high, then this person's going to rank high, and this person's going to rank mid, and this other candidate is going to rank low. And of course, just in a blind way, go for the high. And then sure, invite them to come have a chat. Like, we've selected you. And as long as at the end of this conversation, we're still both a thumbs up, you're in. And so this would be the human contact. I'm not saying, you know, hire blind. Okay, you're here. We don't know what your name is. We don't know what gender, you know, we don't know anything about you. And now you're in your seat. That's not quite what I'm saying. I'm saying there's a way to eliminate the human biases and still have human contact where the two can ask questions. Is this really right for me? Ask questions like, would you work out sitting in a bullpen where everyone else is sitting? Maybe that wasn't in the job description. We forgot about that.
Yeah.
So there you have it. That's kind of the big idea that I have for the world. And maybe one day the world will hire, you know, when likability is not a requirement, then they can skip this whole interview thing because humans are terrible at assessing talent via interview. So many studies have proved this, absolutely proven it, but yet we continue to do it. Anyway.
Well, there's a framework that we use for that, as opposed to, it's an interesting conundrum because it's not everywhere where likability isn't a requirement. But then again, you have the purpose of the job at hand may be numbers. It may be the ability to write to other people. It may be the ability to show up face to face. It may be the ability to work on a physical level with one another and in a teamwork kind of way. And those are very different things. We
Indeed.
do assess those right from the beginning by meeting people. Oh, I have a gut feeling that is not right about this, and it's not necessarily that person is bad, it's just that person isn't for me. And then later on we don't get very old before we start saying, yeah, I don't belong. And then that makes us feel like, therefore they belong or they don't belong, and they're other, and there's this, and we start getting that whole thing, as opposed to just, I want that, I see that person has that I need, I don't want to do this with that person, I want to do that with that person. And later on, if we're just making it to this, to you have to be likable no matter what, and you're not even going to see anybody, and you like what you have to talk about in this field, but that person never is able to relax into that role because they're being judged on the way they show up, on the way they look, or the way they speak, and it's not even a requirement. It's such an interesting conundrum because most people don't have all of those situations. They have the situation they have. They have maybe some situations from the past and maybe a few situations that they have. So, that was my kind of long response to thinking out loud about, wow, this is really a conundrum, because how do we meet people when we get outside of that, when the purpose is different, and how can we mitigate our own intrinsic biases, which we all have ingrained in us.
Indeed.
So
Indeed.
your purpose, your personal purpose, your overarching purpose is connection with people and connection of people. It's inclusion. And your targeted purpose is where you see inclusion not happening. So I want to kind of close this out with is there a way in which that also encompasses how you serve? As it seems like you do serve, like that is something that is part of your intrinsic being. Would you say that is that you are service oriented?
Indeed, that was the book that I was writing in 2019. I'd interviewed a lot of servant leaders, and so this was a book on servant leadership. And I kind of stopped thinking about servant leadership in the same way when a very influential person was my interviewee. He said, yes, it's about service. Yes, 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 1,000 times yes. But the problem with servant leadership is it simply isn't inclusive enough. And I'm like, what do you mean? He said, what about a 101-year-old grandma who never had, a job? She was a stay-at-home mom, and yet the whole community sees that person as a leader. Would you say they're a servant leader? Well, yes, but most people, at least in the Western society, think of leadership very much in terms of who can put butts in seats on the bus. But he said, I don't think about leadership that way. He said, I think about leadership in terms of the everyday leader. Someone helping an old lady across the street is an everyday leader. A person who offers excellent service at the checkout stand is an everyday leader. I thought about it and said, the book I'm writing is trash. You're absolutely right. I don't want the audience to be this limited set of people who kind of are managers. I want this book to be about the everyday leader. And so anyway, fast forward a lot. And yes, there's a connection between service and, and pursuit of meaning, for sure. I can't hear you.
I want to thank you so much for being here and talking about service and talking about purpose and meaning and how you've shown up in this way. It's really been such an interesting conversation. Will we see any what's the next book we'll see from you, or is that no longer on the table?
So definitely books are on the table. I needed to insert a book before I get back to the three that I've already started.
So there's a series coming.
Yes. But the first book I'm going to be writing is one with a dear friend of mine who may not be long for this world. His health is suffering. There's a book in him, and either he's going to write it by himself and find the energy, or I'm going to help him write it. So who knows what will happen next. But with that said, I can't spoil that one. But yes, the book I just spoke of, along with a couple of others, definitely there will be a series.
Very good. Thank you. Well, we will look for those, and perhaps we'll have you on again when your first book comes out, or when consequent ones do. Thank you so much for being on the show, and we appreciate you. Thank you for showing us your joyful path.
It was a pleasure and an honor to be here.
Well, thank you for being here, everyone. That was Mark Pfister. And if you know someone who has shown up in your workplace or in your life, your community, your church, your anywhere, and who has lifted you, lifts the community, you believe they've lifted themselves, and they show up in a way that appeals to you, send them my way. I would be happy to interview them. Or if you yourself have a joyful path that you would like to talk about, or a way that you show up in the world that is lifting others, let me know. Thank you so much for being here. If you liked this, please hit like. And if you are on YouTube and you haven't done it yet, I would encourage you to ever so gently push the subscribe button. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you next week on The Joyful Path and the Tuesday telecast.